Welcome into the NASCAR Live 4 Lock Show right here on Stokastic.com. I am Jason Floyd. Of course, we are here to break down today's Quaker State 400. And if you're not been paying attention to the news, the green flag is now moved up 20 minutes, now at 3:03 p.m. Eastern time. The reason that green flag was moved up 20 minutes is because of rain that is expected to happen later on today. Of course, as always, I am joined by Chris Pennell. Chris, always great to be here on a Sunday talking a little NASCAR DFS with you. And I feel like, and by the way, we're sponsored by Prize Picks. We'll talk about some props over Prize Picks here in a little bit. But Chris, I really feel like where we have to kind of start is talking about is the weather aspect of this race, because this is a race that potentially may not go the full length here, and maybe they only get half these laps in. Of, you know, that's got to go into our thought process of how we're developing lineups.
Yeah, for sure. And what's up, Jason? Looking forward to the race today. And yeah, like you said, lots of weather to be concerned about, and there's a lot of other stuff to be concerned about as well. This is a newer track. We did race here earlier in the season, but this is a newly reconfigured Atlanta Motor Speedway. It's no longer the intermediate 1.5 mile track that's going to completely eat up tires. We are basically at mini Daytona. Now, maybe it's not going to play out exactly like that. Maybe we don't get a complete big one that takes on half the field. The potential is there for it, but we do have pack racing, and we have weather in the forecast. They moved up the lock time on, I believe, on DraftKings up, and they obviously moved up the race time. So they're trying to get it in at least before halfway. So if there is rain that comes in to where we can't really race for a while, they might just end up calling it. So it is something you have to factor in. If that does end up happening, that's going to limit the amount of Dominator points available. And really, Dominator points really weren't too much of a factor for me this weekend anyway, considering we are pack racing and it takes away the ability to project fast laps. So that could put even more of an inclination on rostering drivers that have PD upside. And it does make the drivers up front a little bit riskier, unless they all happen to finish up there, which is, I guess, possible.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about super speedway racing. Of, you know, one of the things I think you have to talk about here is the fact of when you're building lineups, do not have an issue if you've got $2,000+ left on the table, because, you know, how many times at these super speedway races is the fact that the optimal lineup ends up having a big chunk of cash left on the table.
Yeah, the most extreme one I've ever seen was at Daytona a few seasons ago. I'm pretty sure there was close to $20,000 left on the table. I'm not expecting that to be the case this weekend. But my favorite lineup, like I was just hand building some lineups once we had qualifying yesterday, and one of my favorite lineups left close to $10,000 on the table. Like, it's not a bad thing to leave money on the table. Now, there is some pretty good lineups you can make that are close to 50K flat, but you can pretty much go wherever you want as far as salary is concerned today.
Yeah, my when I was building my head-to-head lineups, I had 2,100 left on the table. Yeah, and that counted, and basically my low end pump play was Corey LaJoie, for where he's starting, and that's the one thing to kind of take advantage of that. You mentioned about Dominators not big. You know, there's probably going to be people who are going to say, "Are we hashtag stack in the back?"
Yeah, I'm not going to be full on hashtag stack the back this weekend. If it's Daytona 500, maybe the Talladega Fall Race or the Daytona Summer Race, yeah, I don't mind doing that, to where you're just rushing the driver starting in the 30s for, say, cash games, because, yeah, there's always going to be massive wrecks at Daytona. Atlanta, it could be a bit hit or miss here. I definitely think we're going to see some cars get trashed. We did lose about 10 to 11 cars in the first race, and we saw many lead changes. So it still is a bit of a super speedway, but I'm not full on stacking the back. I am mixing and matching drivers, starting closer to the front, mixed in with the back. And I do have a lot of rules on obviously in the optimizer this weekend that I'm sure people would like to hear about as well.
Oh, I'm sure everyone wants to know, hey, Chris, what's those groups I'm setting up, man? Give me like, in terms of like, and obviously it's going to differentiate every week. Like, is one of those groups of saying, you know, when you look at the top three drivers who are three of the most expensive drivers on this course in the slate, are you looking at that going against the optimizer and saying, don't give me more than or one or two at the most?
Yeah, I didn't go in that far, but they are kind of in a separate group there. So for me personally, I have 3 rules this weekend. From drivers starting 1st through 12th, I have it set at 0 to 2 drivers per lineup. And you could even make a separate one for the top 3 for a max of 1, just so you don't get 2 by accident. That is something you could do for sure. Then 13th through 24th, I have 0 to 4 drivers. And then 25th on back, I have it currently set at 2 to 6 drivers per lineup. Yep.
Of course, if you do got any questions, you can line those up into chat. Of course, we're going to break down this slate for you. Of course, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you keep up with everything we got going on over here on the Stokastic YouTube channel. Of course, our DFS offers, giveaways, and so much more. Of course, hit that notification bell so you get alerts when a show goes live. Of course, you may have noticed that we are now known as Stokastic instead of Awesemo, but because the brand has changed doesn't mean anything else as the content tools data 100% is the same. The Awesemo Alex Baker isn't going anywhere. He's not changing his DFS username to Stokastic. We haven't merged or been acquired. This is just simply a brand shift, and everything you've grown to love about this channel and website is 100% not changing. So you got to check out those tools we have over at stokastic.com. If you've never been a member of Stokastic, we'll let you know about a great offer we have come up here in a little bit. But let's get into the upper tier salaries on this one, Chris, as it's be the drivers who are 9K and above over on DraftKings. So we'll start right off the top. The man that's starting 6. We know that more times than not, you're leading the bandwagon for Ryan Blaney here. 10,700 on DraftKings, 13,000 on FanDuel. And one of the top favorites on the betting side to win this race.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. He is the only driver I like in this upper tier range over on DraftKings. The other drivers are just starting so close to the front. And Ryan Blaney is too as well, but at least he has a little bit of PD upside starting in 6th place. But if I had to bet on anybody to win this race, if I was forced to, I'd rather not bet on anybody to win this race but Ryan Blaney. I would say he's definitely the guy I would have to pick. He's got the best average running position at super speedways this year. He has the best drive rating. Only one top 10 to show for it, but again, finishes can be a bit noisy at super speedways the past few years at these types of tracks. Also the best average running position. Team Penske tends to run very well at these types of tracks. And while he's sitting very nicely in the point standings this year, he still doesn't have a win. And if we get multiple new winners, there's a chance he can end up missing the playoffs. So Blaney definitely has motivation to win this race, stay up front, pick up some points, and potentially win the race. And I think he's an excellent tournament target out of anybody. I think he's actually the best tournament target of all the drivers starting inside the top 10.
In terms of, obviously, he's a Ford. Is Ford the car manufacturer that you found yourself getting to more than, say, the Chevys and the Toyotas?
Well, there's been weeks this year where I've been very manufacturer focused. I know last week we were very anti-Toyota. They struggled a lot. And then previous weeks we were very pro-Toyota. For a super speedway, I usually tend to lean on the Fords a little bit more, but this week I'm kind of spread out and not really focused on a specific one.
Of course, you mentioned about that, this tier, you have the drivers who are starting 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, all in this tier. Chase Elliott starting on the pole, 10,500 on DraftKings, 14,000 on FanDuel. Obviously, the one thing is him being on the pole and him being optimal. And, right before the show, and, I saw the fact of the race got moved up 20 minutes, and I'm thinking about it and saying, okay, if this race is shortened,
right,
does that give us an advantage potentially on Chase Elliott? Because, I know you talked about it in one of your videos where you said, look, if he's going to be optimal, he probably has to win the race.
Oh, yeah, he absolutely has to win the race. And we've seen in the past where the driver starting in the pole wins the super speedway, and they're still not in the optimal lineup. And the reason for that being is, yes, you can pick up some lap lead points, but those aren't worth nearly as much as fast lap points. That's 0.25 compared to 0.45. In fast laps, you just cannot project them at these types of tracks. They're drafting in packs, and everybody has an equal chance of really getting a fast lap unless you're not in the draft. Obviously, you're not going to get one, but I was looking at the fast laps at Atlanta earlier in the season. It pretty much 80-90% of the field was all within 8 to 15 fast laps. And that goes for drivers like Corey LaJoie and drivers you wouldn't typically expect. So it takes away the dominator upside. So if you were playing Chase Elliott, you were playing him to win. And if you're getting over the 20% Chase Elliott, you're basically telling yourself there's a 20% chance that Chase Elliott wins. And I just don't think that's correct at a super speedway track. So I'm definitely going to be underweight compared to the field today.
Then you got Ross Chastain, who is starting 2nd, 10,300 on DraftKings, 13,500 over on FanDuel.
Yeah, I'm pretty upset that Ross Chastain is starting 2nd because I never like fading Ross Chastain. It's a scary thing to do. And he finished 1st at Dega early in the season, finished 2nd at Atlanta earlier in the season. So, yeah, he's been pretty good just about everywhere. Super speedways, road courses, whatever it is. You want to play Ross Chastain. The problem is, again, similar to Chase Elliott, if you were playing Ross Chastain this weekend, you are playing him to win. And do I think there's a 15 to 20% chance he wins? No, I think that's more so a 7 to 8% chance he wins. So once again, similar to Elliott, I'll be underweight. I don't want to be, but just based off past history at super speedways, the numbers would tell you to be underweight here.
Then we've got Kyle Larson, who's starting third, 10,100 DraftKings, 12,500 over on FanDuel.
Yeah, it's a little bit easier for me to talk down Kyle Larson here because I typically like playing Chase Elliott, Ross Chastain at these types of tracks. Kyle Larson, not so much. He did finish fourth at Dega earlier in the year, but before that, he's just typically not the greatest super speedway racer. I mean, 30th at Atlanta, 32nd at Daytona, 37th at Dega, 40th at Dega last year. It's been a rough stretch for Kyle Larson, one of the worst super speedway racers out there really over the course of the past few seasons. Starting in third, again, similar to the two we talked about, he basically has to win, and I think there's a kind of a long shot for Kyle Larson to win.
Now we got a pair of Joe Gibbs drivers, as we've got Kyle Busch, who's starting 19th at 9,900 on DraftKings, 11,000 over on FanDuel, and then Denny Hamlin, who's starting 16th, 9,700 over on DK, 12,000 on FanDuel. So now we start to kind of get into these drivers that do have a little bit of place differential to work with.
Yeah, and you're going to see them pretty popular on both sides today, but it's for good reason. The price points are nice. They're in good starting positions. People got to keep in mind, though, just because they have some PD does not make them extremely safe. Like, they have a very equal chance of everybody else just wrecking, and they don't have the floor of drivers that are starting near 30th place have. So there is some downside here, but I do like them quite a bit. Kyle Busch tends to run very well at the super speedways, but tends to get caught up a lot in some wrecks. But so far this year, he hasn't been too bad. Did finish 33rd at Atlanta, but third at Dega and sixth at Daytona. And as for Denny Hamlin, his teammate, he is one of the best super speed racers of all time. He's got multiple Daytona 500 wins. And starting in 16th, he's got a really nice looking car this weekend, the red Coca-Cola. So I'll play him just because of the paint scheme. Really. But I do like Denny Hamlin quite a bit today.
Then we got Joey Logano, who is starting 17th. He's 9,600 on DraftKings, 10,000 over on FanDuel.
So Logano is basically the similar play to Ryan Blaney, but just with a lot more PD upside. So I'm going to get to him a little bit more, but you'd expect the Team Penske cars to team up here, run towards the front, which they typically do at super speedways. These drivers really have some of the best average ranking positions in the entire field the past few seasons at similar tracks. And Logano was able to crack the top 10 at Atlanta earlier in the season. He's got race winning upside. You got some PD mixed in there. I think he's an excellent play today.
Then you got William Byron, who is starting 13th, 9,500 on DraftKings, 11,500 over on FanDuel.
So Byron can be pretty hit or miss at these types of tracks. He did win at Atlanta earlier in the season, led a lot of laps, so that he does have that going for him. But man, these are like wreckers or checkers, it seems like, because 30th at Daytona, 36th at Dega, 38th at Daytona last year, but then second at Dega. So as long as he doesn't have issues, he should run pretty well. And I think he's a nice pivot off of Logano, Hamlin, and Busch because they start a little bit further back, so they're going to pick up some more ownership. But I mean, it's only a few spots further up with lower ownership, and he won this race and dominated early in the season. I do think he's a pretty solid tournament play there.
Then we got Tyler Reddick, who is starting in fourth, 9,300 on DraftKings, 10,000 on FanDuel. And I know you're not loving this play here today.
Yeah, he's probably one of my least favorite plays in the slate with Kyle Larson today. I just don't see a reason to go here. If you're playing Reddick, you were playing him to win. I just can't see Tyler Reddick winning two races in a row. And plus, his track record at super speedways, he did finish 6th and 7th last year at Daytona and Talladega, but the past four races at them, 39th, 28th, 35th, and 39th. He's just one of those drivers that can be a bit aggressive, maybe make a stupid move here and there and get caught up in the mess. So starting in fourth feels like a pretty good fade to me.
The final driver in this tier is Martin Truex Jr., who is starting 9th at 9,100 on DraftKings, 9,500 on FanDuel.
So Truex is a guy I never used to play at super speedways, but the past four races at them, he's actually been quite good. I mean, 12th at Dega, 13th at Daytona, 8th at Atlanta, and 5th at Dega. And I also believe he has the second best average finish of all drivers at super speedways this year. Starting in 9th, he's going to go a little bit under the radar because he's priced right around a lot of chalkier plays with Busch, Hamlin, Logano, Byron, and you also have Bubba Wallace, who we're about to talk about soon in the 8K range. So I think Truex is an interesting tournament flyer. I wouldn't go overboard on him, but he's definitely in some of my lineups today.
I mentioned a little bit earlier on the show that if you've never been a Stokastic Plus member, right now is a great time to sign up. We've got a great offer for you right now, as you can get 50% off your first week of any Stokastic Plus pass. All you got to do is click the link in the video description below to activate the offer, or you can head over to our join page over at stokastic.com and be sure to use the promo code NASCAR LBL, all caps, one word, NASCAR LBL, for 50% off your first week of any any weekly package that we do offer. Of course, if you just want to play NASCAR DFS, you can sign up for that NASCAR weekly pass. Get that for 50% off your first week. Now, this is for new users only, and highly recommend adding Fantasy Cruncher to your account, especially when you're trying to, figure out some lineups. Like I've already seen some, people talking about it in chat about, how much money to leave on the table. And of course, that top driver tool is a tool that I exported out, and I'm looking at a lot of different things that to help develop my lineups. I will tell you, like, the DK top 6 percentage is one of the things that I truly do look at. I mean, I'm more of a DraftKings player than I play over at FanDuel, and looking at that projections also, that floor ceiling is also something to kind of look at. I think we'll probably get into that here in a moment here with Bubba Wallace, because obviously he's going to be a very popular play today, but you got to take advantage of that offer. We got it going for 50% off your first week of any Stokastic Plus weekly pass. Use that promo code NASCAR LBL, and let's everyone know that they heard about here on the NASCAR Live Before Lock shows. And of course, I'll appreciate everyone in here. Now let's move on to the mid tier. So it'll be the drivers in the 8K and the 6K range. So let's start right off with Daniel Suarez. He is starting 7th, 8,900 on DraftKings, 9,800 on FanDuel.
Yeah, so Daniel Suarez has made me some good monies the past few weeks, but I'm going to hop off the train here, starting in 7th at a super speedway. He was able to finish 4th at Atlanta, but typically not a driver I roster too often at super speedways. Yes, I know he's with Trackhouse now, and they've had a ton of speed this year. 31st at Dega, though, 18th at Daytona, 23rd, 20th, 23rd, and some of his recent finishes at super speedways. Starting in 7th, I feel like the upside is very limited here. He's going to have to finish inside pretty much the top 3 at his price point to be optimal. I feel better being on the side where he doesn't do that.
And when we talk about one of the chalky drivers of this slate, that is Bubba Wallace, who's starting 32nd, 8,700 on DraftKings, 8,800 on FanDuel. Chris, for me in cash lineups, it's really hard to get away from Bubba Wallace. Oh, yeah. I mean, look, he's going to be extremely. There's going to be guys on this slate in cash games that are going to be super popular. I mean, right. We can go. We know the names. Like Brad Keselowski, I think, is another one. We'll talk about him, about how popular he's going to be. But when we're talking about GPP and tournaments, the question for me with Bubba is, do I want to get there with the how much do I want to get there? Do I want to go over the field, or do I sit there and say, let's just say I'm in a 20 max lineup, but do I sit there and go, you know what? Maybe I go a little under the field just to separate myself.
Right. The one thing I will say, and while he's a fantastic play on paper today, it pays to be contrarian at these types of tracks. Like Bubba Wallace, yes, he's in an excellent spot. He's one of the best super speedway racers. But if anything happens to him, you're going to get massive leverage on the field. So say you switch a lot of your Bubba Wallace to, say, a Kurt Busch you're about to talk about. I mean, you can just get a lot of leverage there. But just talking about the pros for Bubba Wallace, I mean, one of the best average running positions at these types of tracks. He's averaging the most DraftKings points per race at these types of tracks the past 11 races. And starting in 32nd, I know his price a little bit up there, but price doesn't really matter too much anyway. It's just hard not to like Bubba here. But if he's going to be pushing for around 40%, if not more, over on DraftKings and over on FanDuel, probably not going to get quite there on FanDuel, but I mean, it's a lot of ownership to eat at a super speedway. So if you want to go underweight in tournaments, I totally understand that, but cash game log, obviously.
Yeah, it's tough to get away from Bubba Wallace here today.
Right.
Next up, we got Christopher Bell. He was starting 15th. He's 8,500 on DraftKings, 9,000 on FanDuel.
So if you played Christopher Bell at Atlanta earlier in the season, he did very well. I believe he was finishing inside the top 3, top 5. Ended up getting a penalty at the end of the race because he went below the yellow line or whatever line it was. Yeah. And then he ended up having to finish at the tail end there, finish P23. Killed a lot of my lineups because I had a ton of Christopher Bell. But I'm willing to go back to the well here, starting in 15th. He's not usually the greatest super speedway racer. I mean, he only has one good finish the past 6 races. Could have been 2, so we'll cut him some slack there. But starting in 15th, he should be an under-owned tournament play, and I don't mind being a little bit overweight there.
Next up, we've got Kurt Busch, who's starting 21st, 8,200 on DraftKings, 8,000 on FanDuel.
Yeah, Kurt Busch is one of my favorite plays today on both sites. Pretty easy to fit him in, starting in 21st. I'm hoping he was a little bit overlooked because it doesn't offer you a massive PD upside, and he's also right beside Bubba Wallace in price, and a lot of people are going to be jamming in those mid-pack drivers like Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, and Joey Logano, so they might kind of skip over Kurt Busch in some of their builds. But he finished 3rd at Atlanta. He did the tire test here early in the season, so he has a little bit more experience than some other drivers here. And he's a solid plate racer. I mean, I wouldn't call him the best, but he definitely has top 10 upside, and he won at one before. So starting in 21st, definitely a solid tournament play.
Next up, we have got Austin Cindric, who is starting 5th. He's 8,100 over on DraftKings, 8,500 on FanDuel.
Yeah, it looks like Cindric is going to be one of the lower owned plays on the entire slate. And I understand that. I mean, Cindric's not a big name driver. And starting in fifth, there's not much room for upside. If you're playing Cindric, you basically need him to win this race. But he's in a Penske car. He's in a four. They tend to run up front for these types of tracks. And he won the Daytona 500 earlier in the season. I'm not really advocating for a lot of Cindric ownership, but I have a sprinkle in tournaments.
Appreciate Andre giving us a little tip over in the YouTube chat. DK has now moved the lock to 2:58 Eastern time. So something to kind of think about as you're starting to develop and finalize your lineups here for today's NASCAR race. So Andre, I appreciate you throwing that out there. Next up, we got Chase Briscoe, who's 14, 7,900 on DraftKings, 7,500 on FanDuel.
Yeah, Briscoe's in a weird spot. He's starting right in that dead zone where people don't really want to roster these kind of drivers because there's so many other good mid-pack drivers like we talked about, and there's the massive PD play. So why do you really want to get to too much Chase Briscoe? But he finished third at Daytona, 15th at Atlanta, and then wrecked out at Talladega. He's a driver I have about 10 to 15% ownership on, not really because I like him, but it's just like there's the chance he gets the top five, so I can get to him a little bit.
Yeah. Then you've got Alex Bowman, who is starting eighth. He's 7,800 on both sites.
Yeah, Bowman's kind of like Byron, where he's very hit or miss at these track types, not quite as good as William Byron, but he's finished 9th and 10th the past two super speedway races. The problem is he's starting eighth, so his upside's kind of capped. I don't have much, kind of around 10%.
Then we have Kevin Harvick. He is starting 10th, 7,600 on DraftKings, 6,500 on FanDuel.
Yeah, Harvick's just about similar to Alex Bowman and Chase Briscoe, who we just talked about. He was one of those guys where whatever the optimizer gave me, I was fine rolling with it. I believe I landed around, again, 10 to 15%. But the problem is, starting in 10th, the upside's really capped. You need Harvick to be in that top five at the end of the day. And it's possible. It's just not the most likely scenario.
Eric Amarola is starting 22nd, 7,400 on DraftKings, 5,000 on FanDuel.
Yeah, I think Amarola is kind of sneaky today. And over on FanDuel, it's pretty easy to fit him in at $5,000. Pretty good super speedway racer. I finished 13th at Dega, 5th at Daytona early in the season. Didn't do that great at Atlanta, but starting at 22nd, I feel like people would rather flock to Ricky Stenhouse in this price range. And obviously, we already talked about a bunch of other PD drivers. So he's a tournament driver that I am targeting today.
Michael McDowell, he is starting 12, 7,300 on DraftKings, 6,200 on FanDuel. We talked about last week on the show about Michael McDowell. All the guy does, he may not, you walk into a race, maybe you don't feel great about where he's starting at, but guys keeps putting up 30 plus points every week.
Right. He's getting the job done. He's killing it. I mean, you can't ignore it. And the thing is, he's a good super speedway racer too. So starting in 12th, I'm not all that scared about it now. It's kind of tough to get to a ton of him just because it's a plate race and he's starting pretty close to the front, but he finished 8th at Dega, 7th Daytona, wasn't great at Atlanta, but I'm getting to McDowell in tournaments and 150 max builds and even 20 max builds. I think it's worth maybe getting to a few McDowell shares because he certainly has top five upside.
Yeah. I mean, you just go down his points and it's just one of these things of like, there's times and, there's always gonna be that driver that maybe like today starting in the top 10, you're just like, don't love it, but McDowell just keeps going out there. Right. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is our next driver. He's starting 20th, 7,100 on DraftKings, 6,000 on FanDuel. How nervous are you to roster Ricky Stenhouse Jr. at a speedway? Yeah,
if you're rostering Ricky today, just know there's a 50% chance he's going to win the race or a 50% chance he is going to finish just about dead last because obviously he's got to sell up for a win. And it's always wreckers or checkers for him. I mean, if you're looking at the numbers this year, it's been wreckers, 30th at Dega, 31st at Atlanta, and 28th at Daytona. And that's not to say he's a bad plate racer. He's actually pretty good. He's able to get up front, lead laps. I think he was up front at Atlanta. Then he met Brad Keselowski. And as you can see, meeting Brad Keselowski at a super speedway tends to lead to these 30th place finishes. But I mean, Stenhouse is a good tournament target. I wouldn't touch him in cash games, but he's definitely a guy with upside today.
And you mentioned something there that there are drivers who, it's all about trying to get the win to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, right. I mean, some of these guys are locked in, so they don't have to be quite as aggressive if they don't want to. I mean, obviously, some drivers are going to be. You're not going to see Joey Logano be lax out there just because he's locked in. But some of these drivers on the outside looking in that obviously can't point their way in. I mean, they have to sell out for a win, and this is the best kind of track to do so.
Chris Buescher, he is starting 11th. He's 7,000 on DraftKings, 6,800 on FanDuel.
Buescher is basically the same exact play as Michael McDowell, in my opinion. Both are really solid plate racers. Both are pretty underrated at them. He has finishes of 7th, 6th, and 2nd the past few super speedway races. Did wreck down at Talladega early on, no fault to his own. But starting at 11th, he's one of those drivers, legit top five upside, and honestly, could be a race winner.
Austin Dillon is starting 26, 6,900 on DraftKings, 7,000 on FanDuel.
Yeah, and we're starting to get into a lot of good plays here. There's really not a driver that I do not dislike or do not like here. So, I mean, Austin Dillon starting in 26, he finished second at the most recent Super Speedway race, had an issue at Atlanta, but I think he's cash game viable and have a good chunk of him in tournaments as well.
Eric Jones is starting 25th, 6,700 on DraftKings, 5,500 on FanDuel.
I think you can make a case for Eric Jones being the best play on the slate today. He's one of my favorite drivers to own starting in 25th. I currently have him in my cash game build. Finished 6th at Talladega, 14th at Atlanta. And going back to last year, finishes of 9th and 12th place. He's a very good plate racer. He has the second best average running position, only behind Ryan Blaney this year at these similar tracks. So definitely a big fan of him, and I'm planning on being really overweight.
Then we've got Brad Keselowski, who is starting 31st, 6,500 DraftKings, 5,800 on FanDuel. Anyone who's listened to you knows your thoughts on Brad at super speedways, and obviously going to be a very popular play today.
Yeah, and for good reason. He's kind of similar to Ricky Stenhouse, where it can be a bit at wreckers or checkers for Keselowski, but he definitely has a cleaner track record. There was a point, though, a couple seasons ago where Keselowski was just wrecking out each and every single race. It seemed like at a super speedway, but recently, besides the 23rd at Dega, he's finished 12th, 9th, 2nd, 34th last year at Daytona, but then he won the Talladega race last year as well. I know he's obviously in different equipment these days, but he's still in a Ford. And we saw early in the season, he's still able to run up front in this car. So, I mean, starting in 31st, there's really no reason not to like Keselowski in any format today.
Justin Haley is starting 24th today. He's 6,300 on DraftKings, 5,200 on FanDuel.
Yeah, I think Haley's one of the best tournament targets. A lot of people are going to go to Eric Jones, Brad Keselowski, and similar price range that we just talked about. But Justin Haley, a pretty darn good plate racer. He's actually in the top 3 for average 3K points per race the past few years at super speedways. Does have a win at one, although it was rain aided, but he finished 12th, 11th at a couple of them so far this year and has a 7th place finish as well. So starting in 24th, if he's going to go a little bit overlooked, I want to get overweight in tournaments.
Cole Custer is starting 18th today, 6,200 on DraftKings, 4,500 on FanDuel.
So Custer is one of the drivers I'm not really getting to too much. I mean, I like a lot of these drivers down here, but Cole Custer is my lowest owned currently. Not that he's the worst plate racer out there, but just doesn't offer as much PD upside as the rest. So I'd rather get to them as well. I mean, 29th at Dega, 34th at Atlanta. I'd get to some of him, but I'm not going overboard.
Then the final driver in this year will be Ty Dillon, who is starting 23rd, 6,000 even on DraftKings, and 3,000 on FanDuel.
So Ty Dillon's usually a staple of my super speedway lineups. Not really grading out too well for me this weekend, starting in 23rd, just not as much PD upside as I would like to. He's had some bad luck at them as well. 33rd at Dega, 36th at Atlanta, but 11th at Daytona. I think if you're looking for a lower owned play, I definitely prefer him over Cole Custer, but Ty Dillon in the past has a really good track record at the super speedway, so he could be a pretty sneaky play in the 6K range.
Of course, this show is sponsored by Prize Picks. You got to check out all the daily prop-based contests they have over at Prize Picks. And when you sign up, be sure to use that promo code AWESOMO, as they will give you an instant first match deposit of up to $100. Very simple. You deposit $100. They're going to give you $100 today to sign up. And, of course, start playing some of these NASCAR props here today. And I know that are we just targeting unders on fantasy scores today? Is that where we're going, Chris?
Yeah, I hated all the over props. I hate taking those at super speedway. And so I just took some unders and some of the drivers that either don't have the best track record at them or just are starting really close to the front.
And the 3 names that you gave me all are starting at the front. You got Chase Elliott, who's at 38.5, Kyle Larson at 29.5, and Daniel Suarez at 30.5.
Yeah, so basically the premise for me there was just the chances of them finishing in the top 3 or top 5, it's certainly possible, but odds are not in their favor for a super speedway because there's so much variance. And I didn't really love any of the props this weekend, so I just took some of the unders on what typically happens at super speedways where these drivers that start up front tend to get caught up in the mess because they're in the thick of things where drivers are trying to make passes for the lead or making aggressive blocks. Just happens to get in the wrong place at the wrong time. So for Chase Elliott to get over 38.5, we're talking about a top 3 finish pretty much. And while it's certainly possible from Chase, I don't think it's the most likely scenario today. As far as Kyle Larson goes, like we talked about, one of the worst track records at super speedways. He's a great driver, but these types of tracks really have his number. He needs a top 8 finish to get that. And then for Daniel Suarez, he's going to have to get a top 10 finish today, which typically does not really happen for Daniel Suarez.
Of course, be sure to check out Prize Picks. You can sign up right now over at prizepicks.com, or you can download their app in the App Store, and be sure to use that promo code AWESOME. They got instant first match deposit of up to $100. So now let's get into the lower tier salary drivers here today. So drivers are underneath 6,000. First off, we got Noah Gragson, who is starting 29th.
I do want to mention something before we talk about Gregson. Bob did just tweet, which if you guys don't know Bob, you got to follow him if you play NASCAR DFS.
Yes.
We do have a competition caution today on lap 25. That does not change anything for me at all. It's a super speedway. You can go from last to first within a matter of laps. So just to let you know, if you saw that tweet, it does not matter to me, and there's no cars to the rear currently. So just to get that out of the way. But anyway, speaking of Noah Gragson here, $5,100 on DraftKings. I think he's a solid play. I mean, it's just simply he's cheap. He's in the back. And if there's wrecks, he'll gain spots. He finished 20th at Talladega. If he finishes top 20 today, you'll be pretty happy with the output.
I would say I actually, speaking of the competition caution, I saw this video. I want to say maybe I either saw it on Instagram or TikTok, and it was like basically, circa like 10 years ago when this competition caution thought started to come up, and drivers were like, "Oh no, that would be the dumbest idea ever." And now you see where we're at with it. But yeah,
back in the day, we didn't even have stages either. So I mean, you used to just run the race, and now you have stages, you have competition cautions. I mean, they love breaking up the race now.
Oh, I feel like that's totally a TV decision. That was a TV executive going, "Hey, we got to change some things up here. Get people more interested in it." Next up, we got the driver who is starting 28th. That's Todd Gillen, 5,700 on DraftKings, 3,000 on FanDuel.
He's basically the same play as Noah Gragson, in my opinion. I have very similar exposure on both of them. Again, if there's wrecks, they'll move up. Gillen and Gragson can still gain some spots even without massive wrecks, but their upside really kind of hinges on to be optimal and more so like a big one, which again, it could be hit or miss today. So I don't want to go on these drivers in the back, but the upside's there.
Then we've got Harrison Burton starting 27th, 5,500 on DraftKings, 3,500 on FanDuel.
I mean, I hate to be a broken record here, but it's basically the same thought process. There is not much that's really different between any of these drivers. They're all starting next to each other. They're all similar price points. They're going to need some wrecks to probably end up being in the optimal. For Burton so far this year, 34th at Dega, 39th at Daytona, 25th at Atlanta. Hasn't exactly been a great time for the rookies so far this year, but all it takes is some wrecks to stay clean to be in the optimal.
And when you're looking over at that top driver tool over at Stokastic.com, when you're a Stokastic Plus member, the thing that you'll notice is when you look at the ownership for DraftKings in terms of these drivers, the driver that people are getting to more is Corey LaJoie starting 30th, 5,400 over on DraftKings, 4,000 on FanDuel. And also the thing about these drivers, and we mentioned about this earlier, if there are wrecks and they just stay in a race, them getting into an optimal lineup could be very well happen.
And yeah, Corey LaJoie is no stranger to the optimal lineup at super speedways. I mean, believe it or not, he's averaging the most DraftKings points per race so far this year at the super speedways, and actually by a decent margin, 55 DraftKings points, an average finish of 11th, which compared to some of these other cheap drivers, we're talking 29th, 32nd, 23rd. Like LaJoie is just the master of riding around in the back. There's a wreck. He moves up. He grabs his good finish. He finished 5th here at the race in Atlanta earlier in the season. He's been in the top 15 each and every single time. And even if you're dating back to the past few years, it's not like he's just getting lucky this season. He's 3rd in DraftKings points per race, an average finish of 16th, multiple top 10s and top 15s. For whatever reason, Corey LaJoie just has the strategy down pat here, and he's been a DFS darling for us.
Then we have got Cody Ware starting 34th.
So after LaJoie, we start to get into a bit of the mud here, which these guys are viable. The only way they're viable, though, is if there's a big wreck. And again, it's not Daytona. It's kind of mini Daytona. It could be hit or miss here. If we lose 15 cars today, you might end up seeing a Cody Ware, BJ McLeod in the optimal lineup. And believe Cody Ware, he almost finished top 25 early in the season here at Atlanta, but he did have a top 20 finish at Daytona. Again, if you're playing these guys, you're banking on a big wreck.
You mentioned about BJ, who's starting 35th, 5,100 DraftKings, 4,000 on FanDuel.
And believe it or not, I mean, BJ McLeod, he finished top 20 at Atlanta earlier in the season. Like, just goes to show you where these are the weeks that if you're going to play these kind of drivers, it's one of those weeks. And again, you're going to need some wrecks to happen. We did lose a good chunk of cars last time at Atlanta, so that's how guys like BJ McLeod and Josh Bilicki end up nearly in the top 15, top 20. So again, if you're playing them, small ownership, but the upside is there for them.
And then the final driver, that's part of the slate, Atlanta Castle. He is not on the slate here today. Garrett Smithley, the low end here. You mentioned about kind of dumpster diving here of how it can work. Do you want to get the Smithley though?
Yeah, I don't really want to. We don't have a race from him this season, so we do have limited data. It's pretty much the similar scenario for Cody Ware, BJ McLeod. If there's a big wreck, yeah, you can sprinkle those guys in, but outside of that, these guys are probably going to be stuck in the 30s for the most part. And just to throw it out there, don't play Josh Bilicki today. He's not getting you points.
Yeah. Definitely got to throw that out there. Of course, if you do got any questions, line those up in chat. Will be the rest of the show here. Of course, be sure to smash that thumbs up button if you like what you're hearing here. Mention a question over from our Discord channel: Kyle Busch or Ross Chastain?
Oh, for sure, it's going to be Kyle Busch for me. I love Ross Chastain as a driver. I play him every single week. Starting at second in Super Speedway makes it really tough. Give me the upside with Kyle Busch with some PD.
Next up, Rocket Rusher. Want to know your thoughts on Chris Buescher?
So Chris Buescher, I mean, he's a driver that's starting a little bit too close to the front to have a good chunk of him in, but do not forget about him in tournaments. He legit has top 5 race-winning potential at super speedways, and I don't even hate him as a long shot to win this race. So Buescher's fine in my eyes for tournaments.
Jay Lopez over on our YouTube says, lock of the day, Bubba. I hate to lock any NASCAR driver when we're talking about a super speedway.
Yeah, I said it earlier in the week. I said, you're probably never going to hear me say this again, but I was like, the best play of the slate, Bubba Wallace. it's crazy to say, but I mean, starting in the 30s at a super speedway, this is his bread and butter. I mean, looking at, some of his recent finishes at these, second, first, third, and so far this year, 13th and 17th. But I mean, if he doesn't have any issues or wreck, I mean, he could honestly win the race.
It's one of those things that you look at and say, if he is able to not wreck out,
right?
How is he not optimal?
Exactly. I mean, yeah, unless he happens to lose the draft in the last lap because he gets pushed out or it's aggressive. If he has a normal race where he's in the draft, he doesn't make a stupid move at the end, we probably see him in the top 10, top 12, and he's killing it in DFS if that's the case.
Oh, no question about it. Yeah. Phil checking in over in Discord saying, is Haley viable for cash or is he too far forward?
No, I think Haley is perfectly fine for cash today. And I was going back and forth on that because when I'm building my cash lineup, I have so much money left on the table. It's like I can afford Kyle Busch, I can afford Denny Haley, I can afford Logano, but it's like, well, if they're one of those drivers that's going to be in the thick of it, battling for position to get up front, and they could easily get wrecked out. Haley, not really expecting him to do that. I think he's going to ride around mid-pack, and if he can avoid some wrecks, there's a chance for a top 15. So I feel pretty safe with Justin Haley in cash today.
Sean mentioning, he says, damn, wrecks get me all the time, especially when I only play 5 to 10 teams in a 20 max. I mean, look, it's just a part of today's slate that you just have to understand. And that's why when you're max entering, just try to get as much as you can. And say if you're playing in a 20 max, I know Alex has talked about this in the past of you want to be playing against the field, not playing against yourself.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, these types of tracks, it's so hard to project. Like, last week or the week before that, short tracks, road courses, it's really easy to kind of build around a tight core because we have practice data. We have a lot of numbers that back up what we think these drivers should do. So when we get to a track like this, where it just opens up a can of worms of like literally anything can happen, when you're building 5-10 lineups, it does get pretty tough, but you're basically playing the ownership game there. You have to get your core, you have to build around it, and you just have to try to beat the field that way. So I understand you're paying. The Rex do give me quite a bit as well.
Favorite low-owned GPP pivots. So I'm just looking at what we're projecting ownership to be at. Right. I almost feel like if you want to go for a low-owned pivot, I might be looking at someone in the top 10.
Oh, for sure. I'm pulling up the site here now. I'm trying to see if anything updated. Stuck on Fantasy Crunchers at the moment, but let me see here.
I mean, like I'll throw some. I mean, I'll throw someone like maybe a Martin Truex Jr. who's under 10% ownership. Someone like that. That's to me like. No matter whether we're talking about NASCAR DFS or any other sport DFS, I'm going, okay, where can I get different from the field? I mean, I want to say it was earlier this year. There was a race where we didn't love Chase Briscoe because he was starting kind of high, and I think it was a race maybe he won. And but it's one of those things of why you want to, get as many probabilities as you can.
Exactly. I totally agree with that. And I have the ownership projections pulled up now, and I'm agreeing with you. I'm seeing Truex really low, and you're going to see drivers that are priced close to him in similar spots that are much higher owned. And well, obviously he's not the best super speed racer out there. Ryan Blaney, I mean, he's coming in closer to 20%. We can get Truex under 10% potentially. It's definitely worth a look in tournaments for that. And you have guys like Michael McDowell, Chris Buescher pulling in very low ownership. And you have drivers that are starting a few spots further back that have massive ownership, but they could be just as good today. So it's definitely something to consider, especially at a track like this, because everyone has an equal chance of wrecking. And I mean, drivers that don't typically are able to get up front, I mean, they can do that this type of track.
Yeah, I like that you bring up Michael McDowell, because as I'm looking down my sheet and I'm looking at drivers that are underneath 10% ownership projection, his name sticks out to me of going, okay, we know the run he's been on this season. Like, right. If you tell me he goes out there and gets 30 points, yeah, lock him in.
Exactly. I mean, honestly, he could win the race. I wouldn't be that surprised about it. I mean, he won a plate race before at Daytona, and this is his kind of bread and butter track. He's also great at road courses. Obviously, we've seen that a couple of times this year, but Michael McDowell's been hot. And if he can stay in the top 5 all day and finish there, I mean, yeah, he's going to be a great tournament target.
My filler Ark, I appreciate you in the super chat. He says, for the cheapos, is Haley, Stenhouse Jr. and Amarola good picks? I mean, look, the Stenhouse angle, like we could joke about what it is, but like it's the type of racer he is.
Right, exactly. Like he's very aggressive. He's going to work his way to the front. Stenhouse is not happy just riding around the back at super speedway. Some drivers like to do that. Corey LaJoie, he likes to joyride in the back. I mean, it just depends on their strategy. Ricky Stenhouse, he likes to charge to the front, get up front, control the race. Joey Logano was like that as well. But at the same time, while it's nice to them getting up front, it can lead them to a lot of danger as well, where they're jockeying for position, throwing out aggressive blocks, and then getting turned. And I'd say there's a very strong chance we see drivers like Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Brad Keselowski towards the front, but they might end up getting sideways and you see them in the wall.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good and bad situation.
Yes, it's a ton of upside for tournaments, but obviously the downside.
Yeah, I mean, like it's as a tournament play, I don't mind getting a Stenhouse. Like, I don't really want to get there in cash because for me, I'm looking at from the GPP side of it of, okay, the upside. Okay. Right. He's gonna race hard, but it also could lead to, magically then him wrecking out and finishing 33rd, exactly. So that's just by like, to me, Stenhouse much more of a GPP play. Next up, Sean goes 5,400 left in a 20 max. Is that too much on DraftKings?
5,400 left? No, I think that's fine. I have lineups that have around $10,000 left. So yeah, totally fine with it.
I think also when you're developing those lineups is you got to start thinking about, well, what's that bill look like? And are you potentially getting too chalky? Like if you sat there and said, okay, you're putting Brad Keselowski, Eric Jones, and Bubba Wallace in the lineup, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to have that combination. So that's something where you got to look at how to get different.
Yeah. And we were just talking about it where you can take out a guy like a Stenhouse who should have some high ownership today. And then you could pivot him out with a driver like Michael McDowell at a very similar price point, or Chris Buescher, like right in the same price range as a guy like Ricky Stenhouse, or even a Brad Keselowski today. So there's ways to play chalk, and there's ways to play chalk and get different with it as well.
Jim says, he goes, hey guys, for the win, Byron Elliott Chastain could win the race. I know on the betting side, Ryan Blaney was someone that stuck out to you. He's plus 1,000. I mentioned about Mark Truex Jr. He's plus 2,000, but I know there's some other, juicy numbers that you find intriguing. Yeah.
Besides the obvious favorites, I think there's some long shots that I wouldn't mind sprinkling in. I mean, Michael McDowell, I believe he was at 3,500 when I last looked. I'm not sure if that's changed, but he's still pretty deep there. Chris Buescher, he's in a similar price range, and also Eric Jones. I mean, Eric Jones has the second best average running position at super speedways this year. You can get him around plus 4,000. I don't mind the long shot odds at all.
Of course, Sam, appreciate you with your super chat. Other super chat coming in from Vince. He goes, best play under 8K on DraftKings.
Best play under 8K. Projection-wise for me, that's going to be Brad Keselowski and Eric Jones there. I'm going to side with Eric Jones just because I think there's a less chance that he ends up getting involved with the wreck, but it can't go wrong with either of those two, but Keselowski is the one with higher ownership.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of looking at our projections, Justin Haley, I think, is another one, in that same area.
Yeah, and he's going to come in a little bit lower owned as well, which provides you some pretty good leverage.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some drivers that people are not getting to at all. I mean, like Cole Custer's not getting much ownership.
Right.
Like literally not much at all.
I hate playing Cole Custer. I really do. It never ends well.
That's me. That's my love-hate relationship with Ricky Stenhouse Jr.
Exactly.
That's what it is for me. It's a love-hate relationship,
Definitely a lot more hate than love, though, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that is very true. Is Brad Keselowski the steal of the day? I would not say steal of the day because he's going to have high ownership. He's going to be one of the most owned drivers today.
Yeah, there's nothing sneaky about him, and it's a steal until he ends up in the wall as well. So it's something you got to keep in mind too. But yeah, great play today, but definitely not a steal because everyone knows about it.
Yeah. Keselowski or Austin Dillon GPP on DraftKings?
If it's a GPP, I don't mind getting away from the Keselowski ownership with Austin Dillon, who has very similar upside.
Yeah. How do you feel about Kurt Busch, Christopher Bell, and Kevin Harvick?
So out of those three, Kurt Busch would definitely be the one I'm going to get to the most, starting in the 20s there, just a little bit more PD upside. Bell I like quite a bit as well, but again, 15th starting position for him, 10th for Kevin Harvick. Harvick's hard to get to because, I could see him finishing 8th or 9th, but that's not going to be in the optimal lineup at the end of the day. He's going to have to crack the top 5, maybe even the top 3 to make it in there, especially if some of these other PD plays hit, then he's not going to really have a chance there unless he gets close to winning the race. But Kurt Busch and Bell, I think, are great tournament targets today.
Of course, one of the things that we always love seeing after the race is over is those winning screenshots. So we want to see you go into the Stokastic Hall of Fame. Of course, you got to be rocking that Stokastic avatar on your DFS profile. You can get that over at stokastic.com/avatar. Tweet your wins to @AwesomeHof, and you'll win a free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum if you finish in the top 3 of a contest with over 5,000 contestants. Looking at some of the people going into the Hall of Fame over the past couple of days. The guy Eric Lindquist, if you're not checking out the videos he puts for Prize Picks, you are missing out. Just an absolute heater, taking down $1,000 over there over on Prize Picks. Got to check out those videos on the Odd Chopper channel. Also, congratulations to Yeti taking down second place in an F1 contest. Dan Williams taking down first place in MLB contest over there on FanDuel. Wayne taking down an MLB contest. Also, Rich with his huge win over there in the UFC a week ago. Also, John taking down first place in a couple of different contests as well. And of course, Team Stokastic of Steve Buzzard and Alex finishing 1-2 in the MLB contest. So kudos to them of Steve taking down 50K and Alex taking down 25K. So once you go into the Hall of Fame here today, of course, be sure to check out everything we got going on over at stokastic.com. Of course, if you got any questions, be sure to hit those up in the YouTube chat, Discord chat. We'll get into those before we get out of here. Of course, we're 10 minutes away from lock here. FanDuel GPP, Eric Jones or Brad Keselowski?
You're going to get a little bit lower ownership on Eric Jones there. I feel like his finishing position upside might be a little bit higher today, so I don't mind getting the Eric there.
2v2 here. Kyle and Kurt Busch or William Byron and Bubba Wallace?
Well, that's a good one.
It is, yeah.
Did he specify if it was a tournament? I'm assuming so.
I would assume it's a tournament,
If it's a tournament, I think I'm going to go with the Byron and Bubba side. Like Kyle Busch is going to be high owned, but so is Bubba Wallace, and I think William Byron could be a nice difference maker there.
Yeah. Kyle is going to be one of the more popular plays here today. Which team do you expect to do the best, not considering rec variables?
Well, I think we'll probably end up seeing Team Penske run pretty well like they typically do at these types of tracks. But, I mean, it's kind of hard not to factor in the rec variables because it's going to happen. But Penske tends to run the shows usually.
2 to 3 low-owned drivers, or is that too much?
No, that's perfect. I mean, if you want to get 5 low-owned drivers in a slate like this, that's perfectly fine. It's a plate race. A lot of crazy things can happen. A lot of good plays on paper could end up getting dusted early on.
To me, the way I was developing lineups is I went and highlighted the drivers that are going to have massive ownership. So, I mean, look, Bubba Wallace, Brett Keselowski, Eric Jones, Joey Logano, Kyle Busch. I'm sitting there going, okay, how do I differentiate myself in the field? And then obviously looking at some low owned drivers to where you can't get there. I mean, I didn't find myself getting to the guys at the top of this, in the 1, 2, 3. Right. I didn't find myself getting there much. I mean, Chase Elliott, I mean, like you mentioned earlier in the show, he has to win the race.
Right.
But you also brought up the point of he could go out, win the race and may not be optimal.
Yeah. I mean, if he leads a lot of laps today and wins, he could be in the optimal, but if he happens to lead like 20 laps, gets shuffled out for a while, then takes the lead again in the last lap, assuming there's a bunch of other PD guys that smashed, it's no guarantee that Chase Elliott is going to be in the optimal. Like, let's say he wins the race and brings home 50 points. Well, let's say Eric Jones, I mean, he can come out there, get a top 10 and outscore Chase Elliott. And a lot of other PD drivers can do the same thing. So even if he does win, like you said earlier, it's not a lock to be in the optimal.
BJ or LaJoy?
Definitely LaJoy for me.
Yeah. Pick 2. You're going to love this one.
Oh, boy.
Gragson, Burton, LaJoy.
Oh gosh. Well, it's going to be LaJoy for sure. Yeah. And then Gragson and was it Gilland?
Harrison Burton.
Oh, Harrison Burton. I'll take just a couple extra PD. There are a couple extra PD spots in the Gragson there, but it's gross.
Odds on the 23 car taking the top 10.
I definitely think it's possible. I mean, he's got one of the best average rank positions of all drivers at these types of tracks. He can work with his teammates. Kurt Busch, and I kind of throw in Denny Hamlin as a teammate. I know they're not the same team, but it is his team owner. So, I mean, he can obviously link up with him, and they're both excellent plate racers.
Next up, Christopher Bell or Ricky Stenhouse Jr.
Well, you're playing with fire with Ricky, but I'm going to side with him with the extra PD spots there.
Yeah, I feel like if it's a cash question, I'd prefer to go to Bell.
Yeah, I think it's less likely he ends up just his car going to a ball of flames by the end of the day. So I could potentially agree with that.
Yeah. Sean, Busch brothers today, which I'm guessing means potentially throwing those two guys in the same lineup together.
Yeah, both are great plays today. Kyle Busch starting in 19th. I mean, obviously has race winning upside, and then Kurt Busch in a similar spot there. Both guys could be in the top 5 at the end of the day. Wouldn't be surprised about it.
Yeah. I was just double checking my head-to-head lineup. So I'm it's what I'm looking at this going, watch, we both have the same damn lineup.
Right.
That's like while playing baseball head-to-heads. I'm in one baseball head-to-head. I think literally we only have 2 different players.
Right. Every time.
Which I'll tell you this in baseball, I like when we both have the same pitcher, then I'm not even worried about pitching at that point.
Right. It just removes the sweat completely almost.
Yeah. Let's see here. Sean goes, man, got a good looking team spending all salary.
Ooh, and you can make some good lineups with all the salary today if you're loading up on like Busch, Hamlin, Logano, Byron, Bubba Wallace, but it's not something you typically do at a plate race. So I usually tend to leave money on the table.
Yeah. Last driver in on a GPP on DraftKings, Keselowski, Haley, or Austin Dillon.
If it's a GPP, I'm going to go the Haley route there. You get a little lower ownership compared to guys like Keselowski, and his name value isn't as good as Austin Dillon's as well. And Haley's been great at super speedways.
I mean, outside of the Coca-Cola car today, I mean, do we got any narratives today?
I was fishing for some. I think someone told me earlier it was someone's birthday or something was going. Oh wait, Chase Elliott's from the Atlanta area, I believe. Yeah. I don't like that narrative though, so I'm just going to pretend I didn't hear about that one.
I mean, look, at some point the Austin Dillon has a reality show on USA narrative. It's got to cash at some point.
This is the best week for it to happen. I can't see him winning another type of race. So maybe it does cash in today.
Yeah. Of course, if you got any questions, be sure to line those up in the chat. Just got a couple more minutes. Of course, just about 3 minutes away from this race locking. We'll see if we get a full race in. And doesn't look promising, I think is probably about the best way to put it. Anthony, last man in, Kurt Busch, Christopher Bell, or Denny Hamlin.
It's got to be Denny Hamlin for me. I mean, I know Kurt Busch offers a little bit more PD upside, but Hamlin could honestly win this race, and I would not be surprised about it. And we just talked about it. That Coca-Cola car is not something I want to root against today.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier in the show, today's not necessarily a race where you're targeting dominators.
Exactly.
Obviously, looking at, stacking the back of some of these drivers who have the ability with place differential, looking at that top driver tool we have, Chase Elliott is, we're getting some good percentages over there, but it's just, what if he doesn't win the race?
Exactly. And it's hard to project these types of races. Like in projection systems, yeah, Chase Elliott should grade out well because he's been great at plate races this year. Obviously starting in the pole, he's got track position. He could lead some laps, but if he gets shuffled out, he can easily just get involved in a wreck. And that's something that really had to factor in the variance for this type of track this week.
Yeah, I feel like I need my buddy Pete in here to let me know who he has roster, because usually he's got the driver who wrecks out first. But yeah, that's just it's going to be a part of today's slate of, you just know drivers are going to wreck out. It's going to happen.
Right. It's just a matter of how many. Like, do we see just a couple of spinners where there's not a whole bunch of cars wrecking out, or do we see a big one where half the field's gone? I could see it going either way. So it's just going to be a wait and see approach here.
Yeah, and you mentioned about not really loving the top of the field here. Right. Like if when you look at that top five, is there a guy that you look at and say, you know what, that may be the guy that breaks the slate because he just goes out there, leads majority of the race, racks up a ton of dominator points?
The driver that I have the most exposure to in the top five is Austin Cindric. It's basically me just kind of piggybacking him with Ryan Blaney, because I think if Blaney's going to get to the front, he's going to have help from his teammate Austin Cindric up there. So just assuming they kind of right up front, it'll just depend on where they're at the end of the race. Do they get swallowed up, or are they going to be strong? I'm hoping they're going to be strong. So I do have a little bit of Cindric, and he's going to be pretty low owned today. So I like getting some leverage there.
GPP 2v2, Bubba and McDowell, or Stenhouse and Bell?
I'm going to go with the Bubba and McDowell route. Obviously, Bubba's going to be very chunky, but you're offsetting that with Michael McDowell.
Yeah, and the Stenhouse, we've talked about, why that could be. It could work out well for you, or it could work out bad for you.
Right.
And Christopher Bell, starting 15th. I just find myself in that 8,000 and under range, more getting into the 7,000 and less.
Exactly. Like once outside of Almirola and Stenhouse, who are fine plays, it's not really that great of a range to get a lot of drivers to. A lot of people are flocking to the 6K range, and there's obviously some, better 8K, 9K range. That 7K range is going to go, decently overlooked outside of a couple of drivers. Yeah,
it's one of those things of, you can pretty much get any type of lineup you want today. Look, if you want to spend all your salary, go ahead. I just, the reality is with this type of race, the optimal lineup is going to have a couple thousand left on the table.
Yeah,
most likely.
It could be 10,000, it could be 12,000, or it could be 2,000. It's a wide variable today.
Of course, we have hit lock here. Appreciate everyone tuning in for the NASCAR Live Before Lock show. Hopefully everyone has a great rest of their Sunday. Of course, be sure to smash that thumbs up button as you exit the show. Of course, we got shows for you each and every day. Be sure to check out the MLB shows that we'll have for you tomorrow here on Stokastic.com. So hopefully everyone has a great day. Good luck in your lineups, and we will talk to you next week right here on NASCAR Live Before Lock show. Have a good day, everybody.